If you look at the history of humanity, there is one rule that never breaks. Civilizations are built on blood. Egypt had the pharaohs who enslaved thousands. Rome had the legions who slaughtered millions. The Mayans, the Aztecs, the Mesopotamians, they all left behind the same things: massive piles of weapons, murals of kings conquering enemies, and mass graves of the violently killed. But there is one exception. There was a civilization that was bigger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. A civilization that built grid-patterned cities, flush toilets, and massive public baths 4,000 years before the modern era. But when we dug up their cities, we found something that terrified archaeologists. We found no palaces. We found no temples. We found no statues of kings. And most haunting of all, we found almost no weapons. They didn't vanish because of a war. They didn't vanish because of an invasion. They simply turned off the lights and left. This is the story of the Indus Valley Civilization, and it is the greatest mystery in the history of the human race. To understand how advanced they were, you have to realize how we found them. And the story is actually kind of tragic. In the 1850s, British engineers in India were building a railway. They needed stone to put under the tracks. They found these massive mounds of old, perfectly baked bricks near a village called Harappa. They thought, jackpot, free bricks. They used millions of these 4,000-year-old bricks to build 100 miles of railroad track. They didn't realize they were literally smashing one of the oldest cities on Earth to build a train line. It wasn't until the 1920s that archaeologists finally realized what they were looking at. And when they started digging properly, their jaws hit the floor. They found a city called Mohenjo-Daro, and it shouldn't have been possible. In 2600 BC, while the rest of the world was still figuring out how to stack rocks, these people were urban planners. The streets were laid out in a perfect north-south, east-west grid. The bricks were standardized. Every single brick in a 1,000,000 square mile area had the exact same ratio of dimensions. But the real shock was the plumbing. If you lived in London in the year 1850 AD, you threw your waste in the street. If you lived in the Indus Valley in 2600 BC, you had a flush toilet in your house. They had a complex sewage system running underneath the streets, lined with limestone to prevent leaks, with manholes for cleaning. They were obsessed with water. The biggest structure in the city wasn't a temple to a god. It was a giant public swimming pool called the Great Bath. But as archaeologists dug deeper, they started looking for the king. Every society has a king, right? A rich guy with a big house full of gold? They couldn't find him. All the houses were roughly the same size. The rich people didn't seem to live much differently than the poor people. There were number 100-foot statues of a dictator. There were no carvings of slaves in chains. For decades, historians have argued, was this the world's first egalitarian society? A utopia where everyone was equal? And that brings us to the silence. In Egypt, the walls are covered in writing. I am Ramses. I conquered this. I killed him. We know their names. We know their wars. The Indus Valley people left us thousands of seals with writing on them. We have their script. We have it on pottery, on copper tablets, on stamps. But there is one problem. We can't read it. Despite using supercomputers and AI, nobody has cracked the code. We don't know their names. We don't know what they called their cities. We don't even know what language they spoke. They are ghosts. They are a silent movie that we are trying to lip-read 4,000 years later. So, if they were so advanced, and if they were so peaceful, where did they go? For a long time, there was a theory that they were invaded. A British archaeologist in the 1940s found a group of skeletons huddled together in a room in Mohenjo-Daro and claimed they were massacred by invading Aryan warriors. It was a dramatic story. It was perfect for the movies. But it was wrong. Modern science analyzed those bones. They didn't die in a war. They didn't die all at once. They died of disease, malaria, and starvation. The killer wasn't a man with a sword. The killer was the climate. You see, the Indus Valley Civilization was built on the banks of massive rivers. But satellite imagery has revealed a ghost river, a massive waterway that used to flow parallel to the Indus, sometimes called the Saraswati. Around 1900 BC, the world changed. The monsoons, which brought the rain, suddenly stopped. The tectonic plates shifted. The great river that fed their crops dried up and turned into dust. Imagine the panic. The Great Bath ran dry. The sewers stopped flowing and started to stink. The crops failed year after year. They didn't fight a war. They just gave up. We can see it in the archaeology. The later layers of the cities are sloppy. The bricks aren't standardized anymore. They stopped fixing the drains. Large mansions were chopped up into tiny apartments as the city became crowded with refugees. And then they walked away. They migrated east, toward the Ganges, breaking into smaller villages, forgetting their writing, forgetting their plumbing, forgetting their grids. The greatest civilization on Earth didn't go out with a bang. It went out with a whimper. But they didn't really vanish. Genetic studies show that the DNA of the Indus Valley people is still here. It is in the blood of almost every person living in South Asia today. When you greet someone with hands pressed together, like namaste, you might be repeating a gesture found on their ancient seals. When you wear bangles on your arms, you are copying the fashion of the dancing girl statue found in the rubble. They are the ancestors of over 1 billion people. They proved that you don't need a king to build a civilization. You don't need a slave army to build a wonder. But they also proved something much darker. They proved that no matter how advanced you are, no matter how good your technology is, you cannot fight the planet. When the water stops, the city falls.